The summer heat hung heavy over Cedar Grove, a peaceful suburb just outside of Austin, where American flags decorated front porches and children's bicycles rested carelessly on manicured lawns. In this idyllic neighborhood, where neighbors knew each other by name and doors were rarely locked, 8-year-old Emily Parker vanished without a trace. Emily was last seen walking home from her friend's house just 3 doors down on Maple Street. The distance was less than 200 feet, a straight line visible from both front porches. It should have taken her less than a minute to walk home. But in that minute, Emily disappeared. "I watched her leave my front door," recalls Susan Winters, Emily's friend's mother, her voice still breaking 16 years later. "I stood there and watched her walk down our driveway. I even waved, and then she was just gone." The evening had been ordinary in every way. Emily had spent the afternoon swimming in the Winters' backyard pool with their daughter Lily. The girls had eaten popsicles on the patio, leaving purple stains on their chins. At 5:37 p.m., Emily called her mother to ask if she could stay for dinner. Karen Parker had said no. They were having Emily's favorite, spaghetti with meatballs, and her father would be home early from his business trip. "That's the hardest part," Karen Parker would later tell investigators, her eyes fixed on a spot somewhere beyond the interview room. "I could have just said yes, she would have stayed for dinner. She would have been safe." But Emily left the Winters' home at 5:43 p.m. By 5:50 p.m., Karen Parker was standing on her front porch, looking up and down the street for her daughter. By 6:15 p.m., she had called the police. By nightfall, all of Cedar Grove was searching for Emily Parker. The little girl had vanished in broad daylight. On a street bustling with early evening activity, neighbors were watering lawns, a teenager was washing his car in a driveway, a postal worker was delivering a late package just 2 houses away. Yet no one saw what happened to Emily Parker. "It was as if she just evaporated," said Detective James Holloway, who led the initial investigation. "No screams, no struggle, no evidence, nothing." Emily was a 3rd grader at Cedar Grove Elementary. Her teacher described her as bright, curious, and kind. She collected seashells, played soccer on Saturdays, and had recently lost her 2 front teeth. The gap-toothed smile from her school photograph would soon appear on flyers plastered across 5 counties, on national news broadcasts, and eventually on a billboard along Interstate 35. The community mobilized immediately. Hundreds of volunteers combed nearby woods and parks. They drained ponds and searched abandoned buildings. The FBI arrived within 24 hours, setting up a command center in the Cedar Grove Community Church. Agents interviewed every resident within a 3-mile radius. They collected security footage from every home and business with a camera. The Parker home became the epicenter of the search operation. Karen and Richard Parker appeared on national television, pleading for their daughter's return. Karen wore Emily's favorite hair clip, a butterfly barrette with purple rhinestones, pinned to her shirt during every interview. Richard, hollow-eyed and unshaven, offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Emily's return. "Please," Karen begged through tears on the 5th day, "if you have our daughter, she needs her medicine. She has asthma. Please don't hurt her. Please bring her home." But despite the massive search effort, no substantive leads emerged. Emily's scent, tracked by bloodhounds, stopped abruptly at the curb near the Winters' driveway, suggesting she might have been pulled into a vehicle. Yet no suspicious vehicles had been reported in the area. No one had noticed anything unusual. The perfect, peaceful neighborhood had yielded the perfect crime, a child vanishing in plain sight without a single witness. As days turned to weeks, the command center at the church grew quieter. The volunteers dwindled. The media vans packed up and left. But Karen Parker continued to turn on the porch light every night, a beacon guiding her daughter home. Inside the Parker home, Emily's room remained untouched. Her butterfly sheets still rumpled from the morning she disappeared, a half-finished drawing of a unicorn still taped to her desk, her inhaler still waiting on her nightstand. Months passed. Seasons changed. Holidays came and went. Emily's 9th birthday arrived, marked only by tears and a small cake no one could bear to cut. The not knowing is the worst part, Richard Parker told a local reporter on the 1-year anniversary of Emily's disappearance. If she's out there somewhere, is she scared? Is she hurt? Does she think we stopped looking? Because we'll never stop looking. By 2007, the active investigation had gone cold. Detective Holloway transferred to another department. The FBI packed up their files. The case remained open, but inactive. The Parkers moved through life like ghosts, going through the motions but never really living. Karen quit her job as a dental hygienist. Richard turned down a promotion that would require relocating. They couldn't leave Cedar Grove. What if Emily found her way home and they weren't there? And every night, without fail, Karen Parker turned on the porch light. A ritual, a prayer, a promise, never to give up hope. "I know she's out there," Karen whispered on the 5th anniversary of Emily's disappearance. "A mother knows these things. And I will wait for her, forever if I have to." What none of them realized was that the truth was much closer than anyone imagined, and when it finally came to light, it would shatter the foundation of their peaceful suburban community. 11 years had passed since Emily Parker vanished from Maple Street. The case file, once urgent and overflowing with tips and leads, had been reduced to a thin folder that sat in a box in the Cedar Grove Police Department's evidence room. Cedar Grove had changed. New families had moved in, children had grown up, and the tragedy that once defined the community had faded into local legend. Karen and Richard Parker had separated in 2010, the strain of their grief pulling them in opposite directions. Richard had eventually moved to Houston, remarried, and had a son. Karen remained in the same house on Maple Street, still turning on the porch light every night, still keeping Emily's room exactly as it had been in 2005. The butterfly sheets had yellowed with age, but Karen couldn't bear to change them. "People think I'm crazy," Karen told a documentary filmmaker who came to Cedar Grove for the 10th anniversary of Emily's disappearance. "They think I should move on." But how do you move on when you don't know? How do you grieve without a goodbye? Detective Sarah Martinez had never met Emily Parker. She joined the Cedar Grove Police Department in 2012, 7 years after the disappearance. But something about the case called to her. Martinez, a mother herself, would often pull the Emily Parker file during quiet night shifts, poring over interview transcripts and evidence logs that she'd practically memorized. "There was something we were missing," Martinez would later explain, "a detail, a connection, something hiding in plain sight." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In early 2016, the Cedar Grove Police Department received a federal grant to apply new DNA technology to cold cases. Martinez immediately thought of Emily Parker. Most of the physical evidence had been processed years ago using the best technology available at the time. But one item had never been fully tested: a child's jacket found in Wolf Creek Park 3 weeks after Emily's disappearance. The light blue windbreaker with embroidered butterflies had been discovered partially buried in mud near the creek bed by a man walking his dog. Though the jacket matched the description of what Emily had been wearing when she disappeared, Karen Parker had been uncertain when shown the mud-caked garment. "It looks like Emily's," she had said at the time. "But she had so many clothes with butterflies, I can't be sure." Without definitive identification, and with no other evidence found in the area despite an extensive search, the jacket had been catalogued, stored, and largely forgotten. Until March 15, 2016, when advanced DNA testing revealed 2 crucial pieces of information. First, confirming what had only been suspected. The jacket had indeed belonged to Emily Parker, containing her DNA along with traces of pollen specific to the Winters' backyard, where she had played the day she disappeared. Second, and more importantly, the jacket contained DNA from someone else. Skin cells preserved in the mud that had caked the collar. "When I got the call from the lab, I literally couldn't breathe," Martinez recalled. "After all these years, we finally had something concrete. We had DNA. The foreign DNA profile was uploaded to CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system. There was no immediate match. But Martinez wasn't deterred. She began the painstaking process of reviewing every interview conducted in 2005, focusing on individuals who lived or worked near the Parker and Winters homes. "We needed to look at everyone again," Martinez explained. "People who might have been overlooked because they seemed too ordinary, too familiar, too safe." Meanwhile, Karen Parker dared to hope again for the first time in years. When Martinez showed her the lab results confirming the jacket was Emily's, Karen broke down. "I knew it," she sobbed. "I've always known she's out there somewhere. I've felt it." Richard Parker returned to Cedar Grove upon hearing the news. Though he and Karen remained separated, they stood together at a press conference, announcing the new development. The case that had gone cold for over a decade was suddenly front-page news again. Tips began pouring in. People remembered details they hadn't thought important before. A former mail carrier recalled seeing a green pickup truck on Maple Street the day Emily disappeared, a detail that hadn't seemed significant in 2005, but now took on new meaning. Martinez and her team methodically followed every lead, but the DNA remained their most promising evidence. They began requesting voluntary DNA samples from men who had lived or worked in Cedar Grove in 2005. Most cooperated. Some had moved away and had to be tracked down. A few refused and required court orders. The testing process was slow. Weeks turned into months. Summer came and went. The 11th anniversary of Emily's disappearance passed with renewed vigilance but no answers. Then on October 3, 2016, Martinez received the call that would break the case wide open. The DNA on Emily's jacket matched a sample submitted just 3 days earlier. The match wasn't to a known criminal or a mysterious stranger, but to someone who had been hiding in plain sight all along. Brian Holloway, the 46-year-old brother of Detective James Holloway, who had led the original investigation. Brian Holloway had been a beloved figure in Cedar Grove. A high school science teacher for over 20 years, he had coached the baseball team to state championships and led the school's mentoring program. He had been among the hundreds of volunteers searching for Emily in 2005. He had brought meals to the Parker family during those terrible first weeks. He had attended the annual remembrance ceremonies, standing quietly in the back, his face appropriately solemn. No one had ever considered him a suspect, not even his own brother. "I think that's why he volunteered for the DNA test so readily," Martinez later theorized. "He never thought we'd find the jacket. He never thought the DNA would survive. He'd gotten away with it for 11 years. He thought he was untouchable." The evidence against Brian Holloway mounted quickly once investigators knew where to look. His green pickup truck matched the vehicle description that had been overlooked. Cell phone records placed him near Maple Street at the time of Emily's disappearance, though he had told police he was at a baseball game across town. Most damning of all, when police searched his property, they found Emily's butterfly beret, the match to the one Karen had worn faithfully for 11 years, hidden inside a box of baseball memorabilia in his garage. "When they showed me that beret, I knew," Karen Parker said, her voice steady despite her tears. "I knew we were finally going to find out what happened to our little girl." The quiet suburb of Cedar Grove was about to be shaken to its core. The beloved teacher, the trusted coach, the dedicated volunteer. Brian Holloway was none of the things they believed him to be, and the truth about what happened to Emily Parker was darker than anyone had imagined. The arrest of Brian Holloway sent shockwaves through Cedar Grove. Parents who had entrusted their children to him for decades stood in stunned silence outside the police station as officers led the handcuffed science teacher to a waiting patrol car. Students past and present gathered in disbelief, some crying, others angrily demanding answers. News vans once again lined Maple Street, their satellite dishes stretching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. Detective James Holloway, Brian's brother and the lead investigator on the original case, collapsed upon hearing the news. He took an immediate leave of absence and later resigned from the police force entirely. "I failed her," he told reporters in his only public statement. "I failed Emily Parker. I failed her family, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life." As the investigation intensified, the full, horrifying truth began to emerge. Brian Holloway's house, a modest ranch-style home just a mile from the school where he taught, yielded more evidence. Police discovered a hidden compartment in his basement containing a girl's shoe that matched the description of what Emily had been wearing when she disappeared. Soil analysis linked the mud on the recovered jacket to Brian's property. And most significantly, cadaver dogs signaled at a specific area near an old well on his rural property outside of town. On November 12, 2016, after extensive excavation, investigators recovered the remains of Emily Parker. She had been buried near the well, her body wrapped in a blue tarp. Medical examiners determined she had died the same day she disappeared, July 8, 2005. The cause of death was asphyxiation. "When they told me they found her, I felt this strange sense of relief," Karen Parker confessed, her hands trembling around a cup of cold coffee. 11 years of not knowing. 11 years of imagining the worst. And now at least I knew. My baby wasn't suffering anymore. She wasn't scared or alone or waiting for me to find her. She was at peace. For Richard Parker, the discovery brought a different kind of closure. "I'd given up," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I'd convinced myself she was gone, but there was always this voice in the back of my mind saying maybe, just maybe." Karen never lost that hope. She was right to keep that porch light on all these years. As prosecutors built their case against Brian Holloway, a disturbing pattern of behavior came to light. Analysis of his computer revealed he had searched for information about Emily before her disappearance. He had volunteered at her elementary school, helping with science demonstrations in her class. He had been slowly grooming his victim, investigators believed, watching and waiting for the perfect opportunity. That opportunity came on July 8, 2005. According to the prosecution's theory, supported by witness statements and physical evidence, Brian had been driving down Maple Street when he saw Emily walking home alone. He knew her. She trusted him. Getting her into his truck would have been easy. "The perfect crime isn't one with no evidence," Detective Martinez explained. "It's one where the criminal is so deeply embedded in the community, so trusted, that no one even considers them a suspect." Brian Holloway searched for Emily alongside everyone else. He consoled her parents. He attended the memorials. He hid in plain sight. The trial began in March 2017. The courthouse in Austin was packed with Cedar Grove residents, reporters, and curious onlookers. Karen Parker sat in the front row every day, wearing the butterfly beret that matched the one found in Holloway's garage. Richard Parker sat beside her, their shared grief momentarily healing the rift between them. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. The DNA evidence, the timeline, the pattern of behavior. Brian Holloway's defense team attempted to suggest the evidence had been contaminated or planted, perhaps by Detective Holloway himself, to protect someone else. But the scientific testimony was unimpeachable. The DNA was Brian's. The jacket was Emily's. The remains were found on his property. On April 17, 2017, after just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. As the verdict was read, a collective exhale seemed to pass through the courtroom. Karen Parker closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Richard placed his hand over hers. For the first time in nearly 12 years, they faced the future together. Brian Holloway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He never admitted guilt. He never expressed remorse. He never explained why he had taken Emily Parker from her family, her future, her life. "Some questions don't have answers," Karen Parker told the crowd gathered at Emily's memorial service, held on what would have been her 20th birthday. "Why Emily? Why us? Why did it take so long? We may never know, but we do know this. Emily is home now, And in finding her, we found each other again. The service was held at Wolf Creek Park, where Emily's jacket had been discovered 11 years earlier, the clue that eventually led to justice. A small butterfly garden had been planted, with a bronze plaque bearing Emily's name and the dates of her short life. Hundreds of people attended, including many of Holloway's former students, still processing their complicated feelings of betrayal and grief. In the years following the resolution of Emily's case, Cedar Grove changed in subtle but meaningful ways. Parents became more vigilant. Children were no longer allowed to walk alone, even short distances. The community that had once prided itself on its safety and trust now locked its doors and installed security cameras. But something else changed too. The Emily Parker Foundation, established by Karen and Richard, raised money for DNA testing in cold cases across Texas. Detective Sarah Martinez became a sought-after speaker and consultant, training other departments on cold case investigation techniques. The Texas legislature passed Emily's Law, expanding the collection of DNA samples and increasing funding for cold case units statewide. Emily's life was tragically short, Richard Parker said at the bill signing ceremony. But her legacy will be measured in the cases solved, the families who find answers, and the children who are protected because of what we learned from her case. Karen Parker eventually sold the house on Maple Street, the house where she had faithfully turned on the porch light for 11 years. She moved to a small cottage near the butterfly garden in Wolf Creek Park, where she volunteered as a caretaker. She found a measure of peace in tending to the flowers that attracted the butterflies Emily had loved so much. "I still talk to her every day," Karen confessed, gently pruning a butterfly bush heavy with purple blooms. "I tell her about the butterflies that visit, about the cases her foundation has helped solve, about the changes her story has created. I want her to know that even though she was only here for 8 years, her impact will last forever." On quiet evenings, as the sun sets over Wolf Creek Park, visitors often report seeing a solitary figure sitting on a bench in the butterfly garden. Karen Parker, her face turned toward the fading light, watching as butterflies dance among the flowers planted in her daughter's memory. And if you look closely, you'll see she still wears a purple butterfly beret in her now gray hair. A small, shining reminder of the little girl whose disappearance changed a community forever, and whose discovery finally brought peace to those who had never stopped searching for the truth.